Picture this. It is July of 1336. The air is thick with the oppressive humidity of a Japanese summer. We are on a narrow spit of land, wedged beside the Minatogawa River. For 3,000 exhausted, outnumbered warriors, this is the end of the line. Their armor is dented, their banners are torn, and their spirits are nearly broken. They stare across the water at an ocean of enemy steel, a force of at least 30,000, maybe more. Their commander, a man named Kusunoki Masashige, gazes at the impossible odds and already knows, with the cold certainty of a seasoned general, that the day is lost. His cause is hopeless, and yet, still, he smiles. He reaches up, tightens the silk cords under his helmet, and spurs his horse forward into the fray. Why? Why lead his men into a battle he knew was a death sentence? Because his emperor, Go-Daigo, had told him to. And for Kusunoki, that single sentence, that one command, outweighed strategy, logic, and survival itself. The legend that grew from this moment swears that, at the very end, surrounded and bleeding from a dozen wounds, he drew his own long sword and, while still in the saddle, lopped off his own head with one impossible, clean swing. It's a powerful, unforgettable image. It's also a lie. Today, we're peeling that famous legend apart. Because the truth of what happened on that riverbank is messier, braver, and far more human than any tall tale or kabuki play. To understand a man like Kusunoki, you have to understand the world that forged him. In the early 1300s, the Kamakura shogunate, the military government that had ruled Japan for over a century, was wobbling like a drunk on a tightrope. Its authority was decaying, and its grip on the warrior clans was slipping. Watching this slow collapse from the Imperial court in Kyoto was Emperor Go-Daigo, a restless, sharp, and ambitious ruler who saw a once-in-a-lifetime chance to yank real, tangible power back to the throne. The problem was that most warriors, the men with the swords and the armies, still owed their loyalty and their livelihoods to the Hojo regents, who were the real power behind the shogunate. Into this volatile landscape steps Kusunoki Masashige. He wasn't a great lord or famous general. He was a small-time landowner from Kawachi province, a rural area south of modern-day Osaka. His family's shrine sat on a quiet, cedar-covered ridge, and for generations, they had held to a simple, unwavering principle. They bowed only to the emperor. So when Go-Daigo sent out a quiet, almost desperate call for allies, Kusunoki answered before the ink was even dry. His first test came in 1331, during an early attempt by Imperial loyalists to overthrow the shogunate. Kusunoki was immediately faced with a situation that would define his career. He was outnumbered, out-armored, and seemingly out of luck. His response was to turn the tiny fort at Akasaka into a fortress of pure ingenuity. He transformed the landscape into a weapon, creating a thorn bush of sharpened bamboo stakes, camouflaged pit traps, and terrifying midnight raids that sowed chaos among the attackers. When the shogunate's forces finally battered the walls down, they found nothing. Kusunoki had faked his own death, setting a massive pyre to create the illusion of a mass suicide, and melted into the dark. He regrouped and seized Chihaya Castle, a place that was a commander's nightmare and a defender's dream. It was perched on a mountain with sheer cliffs on three sides, and only a single, narrow goat track leading to its gate. Kusunoki, with just 500 defenders, turned this natural fortress into an unbreachable bastion. He packed it with archers, stockpiled massive boulders, and had his men ready with bubbling cauldrons of boiling water. For the next year, an army of 20,000 shogunate soldiers slammed themselves against Chihaya's defenses. They built massive mobile bridges to span the ravines, only for Kusunoki's men to set them ablaze. every time they mounted an assault, a man-made avalanche of rocks and logs rained down, shattering their shield walls. And every time they pulled back to regroup, Kusunoki's ghosts would launch surprise raids, nipping at their heels and vanishing back into the mountain mists. Soon, in every tea house and sake bar in Kyoto, samurai were raising their cups and toasting the legend of the general who fights the mountain itself. By 1333, thanks in no small part to Kusunoki's brilliant and stubborn defense at Chihaya, the shogunate finally collapsed. The Kemmu Restoration had begun. Emperor Go-Daigo was back in power, aiming to restore the imperial court to its former glory. This new era of imperial rule would last for about 3 years. The emperor's vision was grand. He wanted to rule directly, as emperors had in ancient times, without a shogun as an intermediary. But first, he needed to placate the powerful samurai clans, the very warriors who had helped him win. He had to rewrite tax laws, redistribute land, and strip many powerful warlords of their estates, all while trying to keep the country from descending into chaos. Kusunoki, now a celebrated hero, was made governor of several provinces. Yet, he continued to live in a plain wooden house, indistinguishable from his neighbors. His lunch was the same as any farmer's, a simple meal of rice and pickled plums. The stories of his humility became as famous as his military victories. When courtiers offered him chests of gold for his service, he politely refused, asking only that the taxes for his home village be lowered. But this new order was fragile. The more power Go-Daigo tried to centralize in the imperial court, the more Ashikaga Takauji, the most powerful general in the realm, began to grind his teeth. Takauji had been instrumental in the victory, but he didn't believe in Go-Daigo's vision of a civilian-led government. He wanted the old deal back, a shogun, a military ruler, to keep the warrior class in line, not some distant courtier in silk robes. By 1335, the uneasy alliance between the throne and its strongest general shattered completely. Takauji raised his banners in the east, declared himself the true defender of the samurai, and marched on Kyoto. In this moment of supreme crisis, Emperor Go-Daigo turned to the one man he knew he could trust absolutely: Kusunoki Masashige. The reports from the scouts were grim. Ashikaga Takauji's army was a tidal wave, swelling past 30,000 and growing every day as more clans flocked to his banner. In Kyoto, the court was paralyzed by fear. The courtiers urged caution, arguing that the city's walls were thick and its granaries were full. They could wait out a siege. Kusunoki, ever the strategist, sent an urgent letter to the emperor. His tone was polite, measured, but the message was clear. Do not fight in the open. Let the enemy come to Kyoto. Let them bang their heads against the city ramparts. We can use the terrain, and when their forces are divided and exhausted, we can strike with cavalry from the flanks and destroy them. It was a brilliant plan, the same kind of thinking that had won him his earlier victories. But Emperor Go-Daigo refused. In the insulated world of the imperial court, retreat, no matter how strategic, looked weak. Court nobles whispered that a true emperor did not flee, that such a move would project an image of panic and cause more clans to defect to Ashikaga's side. So the emperor issued a direct command. Kusunoki was to march his army out of the capital and meet the enemy on the open field beside the Minatogawa River. It was a tactical death sentence, and everyone knew it. Kusunoki's wife and his mother pleaded with him, begging him to ignore the suicidal command. He was the only general who could truly protect the emperor. To throw his life away now would be to doom the entire cause. His reply captured the impossible conflict he faced. He told them, "If I disobey, I betray the emperor. If I obey, I betray my men. I must bear the greater shame on myself." He chose the path of loyalty, even knowing it led to ruin. The night before the battle, he wrote his death poem, a tradition for samurai facing their end. I have no regrets. My life is but dew on the grass, loyal to the end. Dawn on July 4th, 1336, broke over a scene of certain doom. Kusunoki's 3,000 archers and light cavalry formed a desperately thin line. Behind them, the river blocked any chance of retreat. Ahead, Ashikaga's troops flooded the plain like a black tide, a forest of spears and banners stretching as far as the eye could see. Kusunoki's brother, Masashige, rode up beside him and, with a grim laugh, uttered the line that Japanese schoolkids would recite for centuries. Would I had 7 lives to give for my country. The battle began. A storm of arrows hissed through the air, and the screams of men and horses echoed across the plain. Against all odds, Kusunoki's center held for hours, his men fighting with the courage of cornered tigers. But it was never in doubt. Takauji's flanking force forded the river upstream, just as Kusunoki would have feared, and slammed into the Imperial army, pinning them against the riverbank. By noon, the fight was over. The Imperial host was a shrinking, broken circle of men, completely surrounded. And that's when Kusunoki Masashige made his last call. Now it is time for the ghost story to meet the paperwork. The legend, the one that has echoed through the centuries, says that Kusunoki, still defiant on his horse, stood tall in the stirrups, whipped out his long sword, the tachi, and with one lightning-fast, superhuman sweep, sent his own head spinning through the air. It's a spectacular image, worthy of a woodblock print. It's also a biological impossibility. The human neck, with its tough spine and sinew, simply isn't built for that kind of self-service guillotine work. The truth, as recorded in contemporary chronicles like the Taiheki, is a quieter, more somber, and far more profound scene. Surrounded, with his force decimated to just over 70 men, Kusunoki and his brother Masashige fought their way to a small, secluded cluster of pines near a farmhouse. There, knowing the battle was lost and capture was unthinkable, they knelt on the ground, faced the direction of the emperor in Kyoto, and prepared to commit seppuku, the ritual suicide of the samurai. Masashige went first, slicing his own belly with a dagger. A loyal retainer then stepped forward to deliver the mercy stroke, a swift cut to the neck to end the agony. Then Kusunoki followed the exact same ritual, the deep cut with the dagger, followed by the final mercy stroke from his retainer. Their bodies lay there among the trampled reeds. When Ashikaga Takauji's men found them, they were so moved by the display of honor that they left them untouched, a sign of ultimate respect for their fallen enemy. There was no superhuman flourish, no impossible feat of swordsmanship. Just 2 brothers in their final moments, choosing the ultimate measure of samurai honor over the shame of chains. Word of the disaster at Minatogawa and the death of Masashige reached Kyoto within hours. The news shattered the imperial court. Emperor Go-Daigo, upon hearing that his most loyal commander was gone, shut himself in his chambers and wept. But outside the palace walls, the legend was already beginning. Within days, woodblock prints depicting the heroic last moments of the Kusunoki brothers were flying off street stalls, eagerly purchased by a public hungry for a hero. Over the next 600 years, Kusunoki, the man morphed into Kusunoki, the symbol. For centuries, samurai preparing for their own final battles would copy his death poem into their farewell letters. School children would chant his brother's dying wish, 7 lives to give for my country, all the way into the 1950s. Then, in 1890, the Meiji government, which was keen to weld the nation's identity to the emperor, decided to immortalize him. They erected a massive bronze statue of Kusunoki on one of Tokyo's busiest crossings, right outside the Imperial Palace. The statue doesn't show a man in his death throes. It depicts a calm, resolute general on horseback, his eyes fixed south, forever gazing toward the emperor he served. Today, tourists photograph it by the thousands, snapping selfies in front of it, mostly unaware that they are admiring less a man and more the empire's perfect, sanitized martyr. But modern historians are paid to ask the awkward questions, the ones the monument conveniently avoids. Was Kusunoki's final act a heroic display of ultimate loyalty? Or was it just catastrophically bad staff work? By obeying a tactically suicidal order, he not only sealed his own fate, but also doomed 3,000 of his soldiers, and, most critically, cleared the path for Ashikaga Takauji to seize power and establish a new shogunate. An entire army, and the emperor's cause with it, died to make a point. What was Emperor Go-Daigo thinking? Some scholars suggest he simply panicked, unable to bear the political shame of abandoning his capital. Others argue for a much more cynical motive, that the emperor intentionally wanted a dramatic, public sacrifice. By ordering his most famously loyal general to fight and die against impossible odds, he could create a powerful symbol of martyrdom that might inspire wavering provinces to remain loyal to the imperial cause. We'll never know for sure. Either way, the tragedy didn't end there. The burden of that loyalty was passed down like an heirloom curse. Kusunoki's own son, Masatsura, would grow up to shoulder the same imperial banner, fight for the same cause, and ultimately fall in another hopeless charge, loyal to the very end, just like his father. At the end of the day, people love a tidy ending, and the story of the samurai who cuts off his own head is incredibly tidy. It's dramatic, it's simple, it's unforgettable. The reality, a brilliant commander obeys a catastrophic order out of duty, dies quietly in the grass with his brother, and his enemy wins anyway, is not tidy. It's a complicated tragedy of flawed politics and human error. The impossible act of self-beheading scrubs away all the messy details. It erases the political maneuvering in Kyoto, the screams of wounded horses, and the blood-soaked mud of the riverbank. By exaggerating the death into a moment of fantasy, storytellers were able to polish a complex man into a simple monument. But here's the final irony. The real death, the quiet and deliberate act of seppuku, required far more courage and grit than the flamboyant legend. Choosing the slow, ritualized agony of seppuku over a quick death in battle or a swift slice to the neck is an act of supreme self-mastery, the very quality that the code of Bushido was meant to praise. The truth, once again, is far more compelling and shines much brighter than the fairy tale. So, where do you stand? Was Kusunoki Masashige the ultimate patriot, a model of unwavering loyalty? Or was he the poster child for blind obedience, a man whose devotion led to disaster? Drop your take in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories where history refuses to stay neat and tidy, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, so you never miss the next legend we crack open. Kusunoki Masashige did not cut off his own head. Instead, he did something far more difficult. He knowingly marched his army into a guaranteed defeat because he believed that his promise to the emperor mattered more than his own pulse. The bronze statue still stands guard over Tokyo, a silent testament to a manufactured ideal. The Minatogawa riverbank, once a bloody battlefield, is now a quiet city park where joggers pass by without a second glance, unaware of the ground beneath their feet. But every July, descendants of the fallen still come to light incense for the 3,000 men who never came home. Remember the whole man. Remember the brilliant strategist who defeated an army with cliffs and boiling water. Remember the father who had to leave his son a death poem instead of a future. And remember the samurai whose final and perhaps greatest victory was in choosing exactly how he would fall.